Hi everyone, this is my third attempt at doing a video. I don't know, I am actually more nervous the more I do this. Maybe it's because I'm making it more complicated, and that's a tendency that I have. So I want to talk about creativity. It's something that I've been pondering on ever since I talked the last time, and it can also be a complex topic. I feel like it's an important topic though, because a lot of people have told me over the years that they're not creative. And I have struggled with being creative. And so I decided to get really personal because I feel like sometimes that kind of vulnerability can help other people who maybe are in a similar struggle, or they need to feel that they're not alone in that struggle. Being real is more helpful than putting on the highlight reel and saying, this is what it's all about. I'm all that. This is what I've accomplished. It's not always realistic, because no matter what I have achieved in the creative aspects of my career, it doesn't mean that I don't have struggles and that I haven't at times questioned what I'm doing. So the purpose of this video is hopefully to help those and be a contribution to those that have struggled in this way. So I'm going to go back to when I was a child. I'm the oldest of 7 children, and I think because I was the oldest, and as a very young child, I had a lot of kind of alone time where I wasn't having to worry so much about people really watching. I was being watched, but not in a very micromanaged type way. And I was very creative. I would draw, color, tell stories. I was just had a very vivid imagination, and that was not a problem until I got a little bit older. I pretty much could explore that creativity. And then as I got older, it was interesting because we're socialized to be a certain way. So as we become older in our childhood, things that maybe were cute, or oh, that's sweet, or that's nice as children, often can be perceived differently. And so we enter a phase where there's a lot more judgment on what we're doing and how we view the world. So we end up starting to take on belief systems and perceptions of others. So when I was younger, I don't remember ever saying, "Hey, look at my drawing, Mom," or look at what I'm doing, and looking for that approval. I never worried about that approval because I was just kind of stuck in my world of imagination, and the ideas were flowing, and I was playing with color. I remember that was my big thing. I loved color as a child, and I really do think my experimentation as a child is what helped me later on be able to mix colors and understand colors. And when I went to color theory in college for my design degree, I was able to put all the pieces of the puzzle together and not just know what I'm doing as far as, how I can mix a color or whatever, but be able to articulate it and articulate the relationships of color and how they work and when they don't work. So that was something that I think was a contribution to me. But I don't remember my value or my expression really being interfered with as a very young child. But as I got older, there was sort of a judgmental phase where everything I drew, there was commentary, there was well, it's not that great. And if it weren't for a few people that stand out in my life, I had a few mentors even at a young age who were artists, who encouraged me and who were able to look at the things that I did and say, "Hey, you have a really good grasp of this, but maybe you might want to work on this." If I hadn't had those mentors, I don't know if I would have ended up doing interior design and pursuing my artistic talents. And I tell you this because I think that a lot of us are probably creative. A lot of people are more creative than they realize, But at some point, and I wish I had the time to research this because I think it would be really intriguing, at some point they may have been shut down. They may have showed a drawing or an expression of something to, or a song that they created or something like that to an adult, and not received a positive reaction or what they perceived as a negative reaction, and started to shut down their creative processes. And as I grew more into my adult years, I have to say, before that, in high school, I had a teacher who saw the talent that I had and really guided me, because talent without guidance isn't always that great. I mean, you can be kind of lost. And I see one of my high school classmates who was in that same art class with me on live right now. Dylan was in Mrs. Rawson's art class with me, probably maybe all 3 years that I took art from her. And without her guidance, I don't know if I would have thrown in the towel or given up on art. But what I'm trying to get at, if I can do this carefully and have it make sense, is that I went through this phase where I was doing really well and I was growing and learning and felt very, I don't know, my connection's weak. I'm having trouble with my internet today, so hopefully it will be all right. I was struggling with my identity as an artist before I went to her class, and wondering if it was worthwhile, because I didn't really have anyone in my mentor saying, you know, this is good, this is worthwhile, you know, you should keep pursuing this. So I went through to her class, and I did a lot in high school. I had an AP art portfolio, and I did a lot with that. And I started feeling really good about my path, and my desire was to be a fine artist and go to college to do that. I never had considered interior design at that point. Then I kind of ran up against the fact that my art wasn't seen as productive or as important. I think a lot of creative people run into this, where people find that it's not practical. You get comments like, you can't get a job if you're an artist, you can't do this. And creativity is more than just paint on canvas or pencil on paper. There are people who are musically creative. They create songs or musical pieces. They compose. I have friends who are makeup artists, and they create beautiful and even, when necessary, very ugly things, you know, whatever the job requires. Being creative is not just reserved to being an artist. But I kind of feel like on some levels artists get a little bit more negativity when they're younger. And that's why I think a lot of people go through life, and without that support and the guidance, they believe that they're not creative. So after high school, I actually had what you would call a scholarship. And due to different circumstances, I was not able to take that scholarship. And so I entered my adult world with a lot of questions about what was the purpose, what was the point of my creativity. And I remember feeling very discouraged, because it felt like kind of a waste. Like, why did I work so hard in high school to create beautiful things, and now everyone's saying that it's not practical, that I should just get a normal 9-to-5 job as a secretary, you know, and I'm not saying that other work is bad, because everything we do in life contributes to the whole. It contributes to our growing and learning processes. But I went through a phase where after I had my son, I felt like it was meaningless. Everybody that I showed my work to was like, whatever, you know, and so I went through this phase of thinking, well, maybe I am talented, maybe I am creative, but what's the point? What's the point really? Where does that contribute? And I gave it up. I remember tearing up almost everything I created in high school, and thinking, okay, well, I've been told that my job is to be a mom and a wife, and this is just what I should be doing. This is my should be. If you ever have anyone should on you, it's not always a good feeling, and that's a whole nother conversation. So it wasn't until later that I went to interior design school and I revived those artistic talents. But in the between process, I saw some very interesting things. I started applying my creativity to making costumes for my children and doing creative things in the kitchen. And I hope my connection works because I can't seem to connect to internet, so I apologize if it's fuzzy. But I would get comments like from other women, other mothers, like, oh, why do you have to show us up? Or, you know, you're just making us look bad. And that was kind of painful to me because I am not a competitive person by nature. I get involved in a creative process. Thank you so much, Sean. That is really kind of you. Yeah, so yeah, I'm being very vulnerable with this story because I think a lot of people have given up their creativity because of other people, because they weren't supported in that process. So I would kind of want to make myself small. I'd create a beautiful costume for a child, one of my children, and everyone would be like, you made that? Oh my gosh. And there'd be so much negativity. And a few people would be like, you know, that's awesome. You know, you should do something with those talents to make money. But most of the time it's negative. And what I think is interesting is we kind of, those negative things become a little bit more powerful than the positive things. Like we have only a few people saying, hey, let's encourage this person, and they're not threatened by it. But it's the negative voices that get in there and they echo and they almost become part of your own psyche. So I remember once again trying to play small and not wanting to be overly creative. But I ended up deciding after I had my daughter to go get my interior design degree. And part of that was because I was stuck on bed rest with both pregnancies, and I watched a lot of HGTV and a lot of design shows at the time, and I started feeling like, well, maybe being an interior designer is a more practical use of my creativity, because I've been told my whole life it has to be practical, it has to be functional, and that's not practical. And I did not realize until I started doing it again that creativity is a very integral part of who I am, and it is part of the essence of who I am. But I don't actually think that I'm this strange, odd person out there that's creative. I think there are more creative people than realize. And I don't believe that everyone who says that they're not creative is not creative. What I've come to discover is that most people believe this because they haven't had the support in the outlet of creativity. So I'm not an expert on this. I study a lot of things, and I wish I could put more time into this because I would love to see it. I'm sure there are people who really don't believe they're creative. But if you look at the way people create problems in their lives, they create drama, they create disharmony with others, they create judgments, they create stories in their heads. I think people are ultimately all creative. They're creating by default. They don't have healthy ways. I was talking to my friend Angie about this. They don't have healthy ways of expressing that creativity, but they're going to create by default anyway. So I don't really buy into the idea that some people just aren't creative. What I believe is that they've shut down that part of them. And to me, it's a type of energy or aliveness in a person when they're creative, and we can shut that down on levels. So what I think is interesting, as I've been reading about other things, other topics that have nothing to do with creativity exactly, I've realized how much they actually apply. I recently read this book. This is by Brene Brown, and I am a big fan of Brene Brown. And it's called I Thought It Was Just Me, But It Isn't. And it's about shame. And I started to realize how much our culture socializes us with shame. And that shame is tied to us numbing ourselves. We don't want to be vulnerable. And shame is the emotion that comes up when we feel vulnerable and exposed and judged by that. And so I think when you're a creative person, you're going to be more sensitive to that, because we're kind of standing there naked in a sense, where people are like looking at what we've created and they're saying, oh my gosh, because it's such an expression of us, and it makes us so vulnerable. They're like, wow, what are you doing? And I think it maybe even makes them uncomfortable. How can they be that bold to do this? You know, and then it goes down to a judgment of that's not practical. So what I've decided are the major kills for creativity. And this is just for me. I don't have any real research to back it up. But from my going through creative times to where I have shut it down to where I've tried to renew it, judgment kills creativity, whether it's judgment from others or judgments that you put on yourself, which I think sometimes is worse. We'll take a judgment that someone else has put on us, and then even if they're not in our life anymore, we're replaying it in our head. And then shame. There's a lot of shame. I remember there were people trying to create shame for me when I was in high school. You know, I would have someone say, I saw your art hanging in the hall. That is so awesome. And I mentioned it to someone in your family, and they said, oh, yeah, we're just so disappointed in her, because if she was painting pictures of Christ or something, you know, then it would be good, but we're really disappointed in that. And that created a lot of shame for me, because I thought, you know, maybe I'm not doing this right. You know, if I don't feel like drawing religious pictures, is there something wrong here? So that was a shame thing. Then there's fear. Fear is a big one, and it's tied to shame. But that worry of what will people think. You know, when I started making costumes for my children, and people were like, well, are you trying to show us up? What are you trying to do? You know, there's fear of that rejection and being judged for achieving, which I didn't even look at creativity as achieving. It was just something that brought joy into my life. I'm in a process of love and excitement when I'm creating. So the other thing that's a big creativity killer is envy. So envy is something that it can kill on both ends. So if I feel that somebody is envious, or they're upset that I do something, they're threatened by it, and I want to shut my creativity down so that I can play small and not make them uncomfortable, then their envy affects my ability to create. Or if I'm comparing myself to other people who create, and I'm beating myself up because it's not what they have or what they do, or quite as good, then that is another killer for creativity. I have learned, and maybe because I had my mentors at such a young age, that creativity is kind of a thumbprint. Mine is not going to look like someone else's. I've taught classes where we've made jewelry with clay. I've done this with people in the past, and I can show them how to make a rose out of clay, and nobody's rose is going to look the same. It has their own trademark to it. And to me, that is the beauty of creativity. And there are very few people who can duplicate. But what happens is, because we are conditioned socially to feel shame and fear and to compare, we look at what someone else is doing and saying, well, I'm not that good, and we shut it down. So we shut down that and become very numb. So I have always struggled with this, because if I'm not creating on some level, I get like physically ill. And I have gone through times where I've shut down my creativity for 4 to 5 years as far as being an artist. I mean, we're always creating. Like I said, we create by default. And sometimes I'm caught into the creations of other people's drama, and I'm thinking, what is going on? Like, why do I have to do this? But, you know, when I've shut out my own creativity, I'm shutting off like a life source in a sense. And so I made a little list of what I feel I have to be in a place to create. And this is a little bit aside from what I do as an interior designer, because when I'm creating for a client, I'm creating within definitions. There's like a box and there's rules, and this is what I need to do. They're perimeters. And I can do really well at creating in there, but there's a little less fear there because it's something that I can make a little more tangible than just that creative flowing process that I often do when I'm creating art or designing fabric. So I realized that my vulnerability, and it's something I felt a lot of shame about too, and that's why I've resonated with Brene Brown's work. My vulnerability is very essential for me to be creative. And it's basically my being allowing of myself or accepting of myself and just allowing the process. There's no judgment on that. I have to have the courage not to judge myself. If you saw when I'm developing a design or an idea, how many pieces of paper I throw away or how many times I erase it, you would wonder why I keep doing it. My son is actually a very talented artist, but he won't do it anymore because he says, well, there are people better than me. And if he draws something and it doesn't look the way he wants it in his head right away, he's done. He's over it. So it takes some persistence and some patience for me. And I have literally had days where I'm hitting a block. I can't. I'll draw 25 different ways to do something and it's not right. And I have to remove myself from it and get in a place where I'm away from the judgment and I'm away from the pressure, and I can feel just kind of alive and breathe, because my creative processes are connected to that feeling alive. But no one can feel alive when they're numb and they're numbing themselves or protecting themselves or guarding themselves. So that is kind of what I have to be in to be in a creative process. So one other thing that, and I still think I could add to this list. There are things that, thank you, Christy. That's really sweet of you. There are things I could add to this list, and I think I will. Like I said, I haven't researched it, but I have really pondered on the fact that I'm not really this, I don't think I'm an anomaly. I don't think I'm just kind of like this rare thing. I think I'm just lucky that I had some people in my life that said, hey, you have a gift, you have potential, keep at it. Because I had maybe more so, well, much more in negativity about my creative processes. So I'm thinking that more people are creative than they know. I have a friend who can create the most amazing dishes. They taste amazing. And they are actually healthy too. Like, she is so smart. That is creativity. There are so many ways we can express that. So it doesn't always have to be art, but the expression of creativity is about pulling that essence of yourself out. And the world wants to tell us that it's not practical. And until I got an interior design degree, I was considered completely impractical. Like, it was like, what's the point? And so I had a lot of judgment on myself for that. And I have a lot of regret now. I'm 41, and I feel like I threw away a lot of time. And that makes me really sad because I feel like I can't make it up. But I know I threw away that time because I didn't feel supported. So this comes to another big thing that I've had to break down to keep myself creative and start on that path of really creating again. Because more than just creating for my clients, it's important for me to create things that I come up with, just ideas for me. It's not for anybody. It's part of my growth process. And when I'm creating on the side, doing little things, experimenting, growing, learning, and playing with things in a creative way, it actually makes me sharper for those jobs that come up. And I never felt okay doing that until one day I realized that I was waiting for permission. I was waiting for permission to follow my heart and to follow these creative passions. And it hit me. Nobody is going to give me permission. I have to give myself permission. So I have decided that I'm sharing this because if you are creative or you've had inklings of ideas, but you've not acted on them that are creative, and you're waiting for somebody to say, hey, go ahead and do it, that may not happen. And until I gave myself permission, it wasn't happening. And I was holding myself back. I was wasting time that I could have used to create beautiful things. And now I'm like, I have ideas coming up all the time, and I don't have enough time in reality to do what I'm creating in my head that I would like to do. In fact, it was so frustrating to me a few months ago that I started reading this book, and this is by Doreen Virtue, and it's The Courage to Be Creative. And I really liked this because mainly she talks about how to set aside time, because a lot of us have to work other jobs and we have other responsibilities. So we think, well, because I can't sit there and just create all day, I just can't do it. And she talks about how she would just give herself an hour a day. And so I started then giving myself permission to do that and to not make it like a suffering. One of my best friends and favorite mentors is on right now, and it's David. And we used to design together. I helped him design kitchens. He's an amazing kitchen designer. And he's extremely creative too. And I really do like keeping creative people around me. But he's been one of my mentors over the years, and he's been an encourager, and I appreciate that too. So I'm finally giving myself permission to be creative in the little bit of time or the space that I'm allowed, because I really believe that unless we do it, we're going to have regret, first of all. And nobody's really going to be as attached to that desire or need as we are. So the fact that we're waiting for permission, I think that just says a lot about how we're brought up. You know, when we're little, it's like we always have to ask mommy and daddy, and that permission thing, we always need it to be okay. Even into high school, you know, we follow a program and we check in with our counselors. We have everything so defined that it's very difficult to go outside that process and say, well, I'm going to define a few things for me, and I'm going to tap into this creative process. So unless we're mentored along the way, I think a lot of us forget that we're creative. And it makes me really sad when people look at what I do and they go, oh, well, I'm not creative, because I'm feeling a judgment from them that makes me want to be small. And none of us should have to feel small. We should have the permission, and even if it's something we're giving ourselves, to follow those creative ideas. I'm going to show you I'm going to show you one piece. It's an example. I went through some really horrible, difficult times in my life, and I think I survived mainly because I decided to tap into that creativity. I had nothing else really going for me, and so I got into that and started experimenting and started tuning out the voices, whether it was other people or in my head. And that helped me kind of discover some things. So I'm sure people that follow me on Instagram have seen this. This is a technique I developed, and I've developed a lot of techniques that I use in my art. But this one I kind of am excited about because I hit this point when I stopped judging myself and I just started allowing the process of creativity and stopped worrying about, am I creative? Do I know what I'm doing? Like, I took all the judgment out of that and put all this allowance in to just allow myself to go through the process. So this is one thing I'm going to show you, and then I'm going to let you guys go. You would probably not know that this is all made with acrylics and paint, and it's not done yet. But if I hadn't had the guts, because it takes courage to experiment and take the judgment out of it, I would not have been able to come up with this. And I'm hoping I can expand on it and do more with it. but it's just an example of what can happen when you take that judgment out and you start allowing yourself to grow and learn, because creativity is a process of growing and learning. And when you stop that, it stops the creativity. Oh my goodness, Shannon just got on. And I'm almost to the end of the video. So did you have any questions, Shannon? Because I feel bad. The last time you got on, I was getting off too. So lots of hearts. Does anybody have any questions? I have some topics I've been given. I have a lot of people have given me topics, but I decided to talk about this creativity thing because like I said, it makes me sad when people don't believe that they are creative. And I wish I could do something in this world to help people tap into that. Okay, that sounds good. Well, I love you guys. Thank you for your support, and I'm just blown away that I have so much support. And like I said, ask me questions. Let me know what topics you'd like me to cover, because I probably have stuff that I could talk about on every topic. So, well, according to art and design and all of that. But yeah, you guys have a great day. My phone is like tilting because I'm getting so many notifications and it's a little distracting. But you guys have a great day. Thank you so much.